What makes a great leader? And as Mike has said, I've been in management for over 30 years. And I was at IBM for 17 years, and I was at Visa for 13 years, and now I work for a small tech company that manages technology alliances. And I'll tell you, I have learned a lot over the years, and leadership is something I'm really passionate about. And so what I wanted to do today was just share with you the things that, from my experience, I've been fortunate to have a lot of positive results and effective teams. So I'm just going to share with you the things that I think contributed to that. In my career, I was very lucky. I have managed just about every aspect of product development. I've managed, the development of products. I've managed quality assurance, events, marketing, brand management, customer service, and even technical sales support. And I've managed groups from 10 people to 500 people. And it really doesn't matter. What we're going to talk about today as far as leadership applies to any of those organizations. And I think what was so interesting and different and unique about my career is that the majority of groups that I managed, every couple of years, I never applied for any of these jobs. Every couple of years, management would say, Laura, we'd like you to go over here. Okay? And the majority of jobs I got, I had no expertise in whatsoever. It was one of those things I go, you'd want me to go where? Including my first job. So when I started with IBM, I was a programmer, and I was doing communication software, and had come up with some sort of an innovative idea. We had a system, and then we were coming out with a new computer. And I was writing like BISYNC and SL, this communication protocol stuff, and it doesn't change from machine to machine. So we were going to rewrite the whole thing for this new computer. And I realized that we were writing a microcode, that the languages had the same size instructions and so forth. So I said, instead, why don't we just shove it through an emulator? Just convert it to this machine language, because the code works, and communications program is very complicated. And I can't tell you, we saved so much time, so much money, just worked. But it was just an idea, and I was hesitant. I got to tell you, I was hesitant to bring the idea forward, because I thought, what do I know? I'm some junior programmer. But because of that, when I was 25 years old, they said, Lory, we think you'd make a great manager. We'd love for you to become a manager. And I thought, ooh, that's cool. Okay, so which one of these, little programming groups am I going to manage? Well, not quite in this area. Okay, really, where am I? IBM at that point had 10,000 people. Well, we want you to manage a group in quality assurance. Okay, I don't know anything about quality assurance, but I'll go do that. Yeah, and and they're hardware engineers. They're hardware engineers. Yeah, and what do? They do? Well, they test computers. They test them. It's environmental testing. They check to see when you bounce them if they're still going to work, and they put them in temperature chambers, and then they drop them. And I go, and you want me to manage that group? I just had it made no sense to me whatsoever. But the point was that they had, the testing wasn't going well, the chambers were breaking, it wasn't being done efficiently, and they said, no, we just want you to go in. We don't want you to know anything about it. We want you to go in, listen, learn, and then from a leadership perspective, rely on their expertise, right, and then figure out how to make it happen, and that's what I did. And so every like I say, 2.5 years, some new opportunity would come along. Another one they gave me as an example was when I worked on the first PC, they said, Laura, we need software. I said, okay, well, so you're going to give me little programmers and we're just going to all develop this stuff? No, we don't have time for that. You got to go get it somewhere. So I went out and found a company here in California, software publishing, and they put out like an Outlook solution for us, right? And then another time at IBM, I was working on object-oriented. I was product manager for object-oriented Smalltalk, C++. The product was called Visual Age. And I had responsibility for marketing it and generating demand. And so got out there and I generated all this demand, but like we had companies that would say, this is interesting, and I see the little sales diagram where you got all these reusable components and you plug them all together, and isn't that exciting? But I don't understand how I'm going to get from the development environment I have today to this. So they said, Lory, can you figure out some way to put people in place, a support group that would enable people to do pilots? So I put together a whole technical software marketing team, and it really helped us to close on those deals. When I went to Visa, in Visa there was, we had a 500-person customer service group, and they were using a really, really old mainframe application, the service reps, and we had a lot of turnover. And as people would turn over, it took a lot of time to train them. It was like a Kix application. It was awful, and it took a lot of time to actually enter all the information, and the banks paid us for this service. It was like when you lost your credit card, this is who you called. And so they said, Lory, we need to re-engineer this. We need to put in place a whole, client based solution. And I said, okay. And they said, well, the only problem is the last 3 people failed. I was like, okay, that's great. I'm not sure I want this job. But, I wasn't going to fail. I wasn't going to fail. So I was going to take it and run with it. And, hey, some of these people are not supposed to be here, okay? Okay, I will tell you, Hamant works for me. Okay, I have no idea what he's doing here, but in any case, that's okay. That's okay. You snuck in. I told Casey you couldn't come, so now he's going to be mad at me. So anyway, so then the next thing that I did at Visa was we had e-commerce, and they had a group of people that were trying to put together a solution for authentication. The problem we had when we started doing e-commerce is if you had goods online, okay, just going to say porn sites, but if you had goods online where you couldn't verify that you bought something, people were saying, oh, I didn't shop there. So, and the issuers were like, well, I'm not going to pay money for all these chargebacks. So we tried to put an authentication scheme in place that would say you actually did purchase something. So the guy before me who put it in place, it was technically, did it work? Yeah, but it was so complicated, and it had to do with e-wallets, and that you couldn't implement it. So they asked me to come in and say, Lory, you got to turn this team around. You got to get them to think differently. You got to come up with a solution that's more user-friendly. You have to, come up with something that's going to actually work in the marketplace. And then one of the last things I did at Visa was, we were talking about it, was if you think about Visa, they issue cards, and a lot of their focus is on the banks that issue cards. They just want to get as many cards out there as possible. And you probably see every day the news on how angry the merchants are. The merchants hate paying all these fees, and what do they have to pay these fees for? And they're forced to accept these cards. So we realized that we needed to make friends with the merchants. So they said, Laura, we now want you over in this box. Merchant strategy doesn't exist, but go figure out a way to go make friends with the merchants and figure out how you can demonstrate value to them and how you can want them to accept Visa credit cards. So I, put a group of people in place and put a strategy in place to go talk to quick service restaurants and the food people that had the supermarkets, and just spent time thinking about what is your business all about? Because they didn't care about payment. They care about the size of the aisles in the grocery store. They care about, the kids, and the kids want to play in the playground while the mom's buying the food. So I had to understand, especially when you looked at technology is driving more the customer experience. So if all of a sudden in McDonald's, you're going to go pay for your food in the playground versus at the counter, boy, the payment people better start thinking about that, because they could be cut out completely. So it was fun. I met lots of people, learned a lot about different industries, but just once again, another opportunity that I knew nothing about. So the question for all of those was, why was I selected for these positions? What did they see? And I think it was just all about, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is, how do you create groups of people, and how do you create visions, And how do you make the most out of an organization as a leader? Because if you're going to tackle things like that, it's a lot more than just management. It requires leadership, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about today is the difference between management and leadership. I would suggest to you there's a lot of management that's out there, not so much on the leadership side, and we'll talk about that. I'm sure all of you can think about leaders. I mean, anybody come to mind, the people you really admire and respect as a leader? Tell me someone that you admire or respect as a leader.
Obama.
Okay.
I'm a Republican.
But the point is, why? What is it? Okay.
And usually when I listen critically, and I honestly ask myself, if there is a will hold this argument, I will. And there is a person I will hold the argument.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, so in other words, I think it sounds, I trust his judgment.
So you trust him.
And I did say that, didn't I? Yes, I trust him.
Okay. That's important.
And I admire his ability to communicate. I know we called Reagan the great communicator, but I have a feeling that Obama actually has quite is skilled at that as well.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that too. Trust and communications. You hit on two key things. Who else? Who else has somebody that they really admire as a leader? It doesn't have to be a famous person. It could be.
I have a whole group of people I admire. I mean, I just changed companies.
Okay.
Do a lot of interviews and interviewed a lot of people that are like heads of marketing and CPOs, VP. So at the startup I joined, so the entire founding set of leadership, they're all very compelling. They're all very experienced.
So what do you admire? Why do you admire them as a leader, Mike? What do you?
My boss is the vice president of LinkedIn, and I've been a manager for 5 years. And one of the things that I learned in my previous gig is that I did not have enough gravitas.
Okay.
And my current manager has more gravitas than I've seen in anybody. Just basically nothing rattles him, and he's very serious, and he's just, he sets a direction and people follow him because he's doing that. And he doesn't get upset. I mean, this has some quality. It's hard to describe.
So we're gonna talk about vision. It's another good point, and also doesn't get rattled. We're gonna talk about that too. Okay. So, how would you describe it? I would say, I mean, just his demeanor, his presence, his. That's a big one. You're gonna see. We will touch on that also. So you've all touched on some really great points. The thing about leadership is, it's a continuous journey. Trust me, you've got to focus on it all the time. It's something you have to continue to grow and develop within yourself. And the thing that I love about it is you can apply it to every aspect of your life. It's not just business. It's community. I put up here parenting. And I'll tell you where I see the difference. So as parents, anybody parents here? Okay, lots of you, okay. As parents, we teach our kids how to tie their shoes, and we feed them, and we put a roof over their head, and we help them to do their homework. I would suggest to you those are just parenting tasks. Parenting. Where the leadership comes in is helping to inspire your kids, helping them to believe in themselves, helping them to build the confidence in themselves, and really think about, what are their qualities? What are their talents? How can they apply those? Can you see the difference between just doing the tasks and actually having an impact on their life? The last one I talk about is coaching. The difference between how many people have played sports? A little bit, okay. And have you had a coach who really you felt was a leader versus a coach? Okay. So when you think of that, to me, a coach, just a coach performing their job is teaching you how to throw the ball, teaching you the different plays on the field, helping you to run faster or develop your skills. Interesting, but not a leader. A coach who's a leader is someone who really inspires people to be the best. in adversity. You know, they could be 27-0, and they've got those kids just out there with spirit, and you know they're going to keep doing everything they can to win. Mike played lacrosse when he was in high school, and we just said goodbye to one of his coaches. He passed away at 49 of cancer. And I will tell you, there were hundreds of kids that came to his celebration of life. And I think he was a true leader and an inspiration, even in his days of cancer. And I think, you know, because when he had cancer, first thing he realized is, I can't give up. I tell my kids every day, don't give up. I got to fight this battle, and that's what he did. But the point is if you were to ask those kids, what did Coach French teach you? They weren't going to tell you, you know, I had nothing to do with throwing the ball, or they're going to tell you, he inspired me to be the best. You know, he inspired me to get out there and never give up. To me, that's leadership. That gets into inspiration. It gets into motivation. Big difference from just performing the task, right? And I would suggest to you, from my experience, when I see that layer of leadership come into play, it really is the force behind enduring and really effective teams. You know, if you just get in there and do the day-to-day tasks and you manage and so forth, yeah, people are going to come to work and they're going to do their job, but they're really not going to be inspired and be motivated and grow to really to reach their maximum potential. So when you talk about leadership involves strategic thinking. It doesn't just involve sitting there and doing it. You have to take the time. To do leadership, it takes time over and above your day-to-day tasks. You have to think strategically, where do you want to go? You have to be willing to take action. I think you were talking about that earlier. Have to be decisive. You have to be willing to make those tough decisions. You have to be flexible. The world changes so quickly these days. If you just do what is today and don't think about what is tomorrow, you know, it's just going to be more of the same, and the energy and everything else of the group is going to fall. Alignment and cohesiveness, and we're going to talk a lot about that, is really, really important, is how do you create that alignment and cohesiveness? If you don't have a team rallied around a vision and a purpose and a mission, it's just going to be a bunch of people coming to work every day. And things like the innovativeness and boldness. And all of this comes from you as a role model at the top of your organization. It always comes from the top. So if people don't see these things and you're not promoting these things and you're not encouraging these things, how can you expect your people to do this? You just can't. You can't. And this is a really, really important concept. Leaders, you know, you don't get assigned as a leader. You get assigned as a manager. You have to earn the right to be a leader. And to earn the right to be a leader, you have to demonstrate. You have to demonstrate things that others will judge you as a leader. So if somebody says, "Lory, are you a leader?" I can't say I'm a leader. The only people that can judge whether I'm a leader are the people who work for me, or my boss, or the people around me. And say, "Yeah, you know, she inspires people. She motivates people. She makes things happen." I can't make that judgment call. I just go to work and I do my job. Others will do that. So. And we all know, you must know people. I mean, I was a senior vice president at Visa. I had this huge, beautiful office overlooking the bay. Just because I had that, did that mean I was a leader? No. No. It just means I had a title and I had a particular role. So I'm sure you can all think of people that are in senior level positions that you would go, I'm not sure I'd say they're a great leader. Can you think of people like that? Yeah, right? There you go. Good answer. And what did that do? How did that affect you? How did that affect you, the fact that you just didn't sense, you didn't feel that leadership, and you were working within that organization, I assume?
I was happy. I was working, and two people that worked with me had left and gone to the startup.
Mm-hmm.
And normally, I get recruiters reaching me all the time. Normally, I would just blow off the recruiter, but because my management was like, they're not impressing me anymore. They're not. One problem is that several managers above me had all left. With all new managers, and they were just not leaving.
Well, doesn't sound like they were motivating you. It doesn't sound like they were inspiring you. It doesn't sound like you felt confident in their leadership, right? And that's important, very important.
I think it makes you question also whether you want to be associated with that to begin with. Because if you have a different vision of yourself,
Hold,
makes any
hang on
sense.
to that thought. We're going to talk about that at some point too. Understanding and understanding yourself,
Mhm.
very important, and how you fit in or don't fit into a particular environment. We'll talk about that. Yeah, very good point. And a leader, you are the role model. So you got to understand, if you want to, a leader should be creating the optimism. They should be creating the courage. They should be building the confidence. Especially in today's world, I can tell you the business we're in, I told you we have competing companies that come together and form these technology alliances to develop standards. They're not happy campers all being at this table. Let me tell you, it's not a pleasant situation because they kind of think they want to cooperate, but they're really competing. And so the point is I think every day we all face challenges. And the world is moving quickly, and technology, especially we're in the technology space, a new competitor every single day. And people are on our back to get these solutions out and make sure that, we're competitive, we're selling, and it's just a lot of demands and a lot of challenges. Well, if you want your team to overcome, it's very easy for people to just, have meltdowns and think, oh my God, how many people you see walking around, oh, this sucks, I hate this is awful. You as the leader, you have to create optimism. You have to say, we can make this happen. And because if you at the top don't create that, it's just not going to happen. And a great example of this, one that always comes to mind for me is, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Apollo 13 mission. That to me was a perfect example. There was a man, Eugene Kranz, who was the head of mission control. That was his mission. And he was in mission control, and he gets this notification that 3/4 of the way to the moon, there's a major explosion on the spacecraft. They have 4 hours of oxygen. 4 hours of oxygen left. And they're 3/4 of the way to the moon. Now, there were a lot of people in mission control that went, oh my God, well, ooh, wow, that's kind of sad. I guess it's all over. And he refused to believe that. So as the leader, he said his initial words were, failure is not an option. We are going to bring those astronauts home. And he set the tone, and he set the spirit, and he set the, the optimism. And were you going to ask a question?
Perhaps I'll ask it after you make a point.
Okay.
Thinking, sorry.
So he thank God for the astronauts. Somebody was there to say, we're going to make this happen. Is it a huge task? Sure it is. But he's just said, we're going to make this happen. And so he took all the experts, put together tiger teams, and needed creative solutions. He's kind of like, are you in this with me? Innovative solutions for, they had an attached lunar module. So they were transferring the astronauts into the lunar module for the extra oxygen and so forth. And then he needed all this precise data to figure out how to reroute the spaceship to come back and land on Earth. Long story short, they were successful. So you can imagine the sense of accomplishment that he and his team had. The astronauts, thank God they had this guy. There's people who said, okay, bye-bye, see you later. But that's leadership. That's leadership.
That example falls right into a question that I had when we were talking about being a leader and demonstrating that. And maybe it ties into gravitas. So in a situation like that, this particular leader must have had a moment where he questioned himself.
Yes.
Must have had a moment where he just questioned the ability to succeed.
Yes.
I have a vision of like maybe like putting your head, your hands into your head, your head into your hands. And I'm just kind of wondering, as a leader, do we show that side of ourselves? Do we show that vulnerability? And you say no.
No, you're going to have that feeling. You know who had that feeling? Because I happen to know him, and not real well, but remember Sully when he landed the plane?
Yes.
Okay, so he lives in Danville. We happen to know. I know him a bit. His first reaction when those engines went out, he'll tell you, was, oh shit. And he said he knew he was trained for this.
Right.
He said, okay, that was his moment. Oh shit. And then it kicked in.
But that
Failure
was
was
private.
not an option. It
That
was a
was a
private
private
moment.
moment.
Yeah, he didn't announce on the thing, oh shit guys, we're going down, It's not good, no.
Let's pull it together.
Let's pull it together. I'll try and see what I can do here.
Okay, that's not
No.
the way. Okay,
And that's why it's hard for a leader. Now, I will suggest to you, as leaders, you have peers, okay? And you guys, you can shut the doors and you can dump all day long. You know, everybody needs to have a little bit of relief. But as far as your team goes, you can't hope that your team is going to have optimism and courage if you're walking around all day long going, oh, we can't do that. That's not going to happen. Or that's not going to work. Or, oh, my God, I don't think I can. Think of, you know, they're looking to you for that hope and confidence. They're looking to you. I will say I was on a Southwest jet one time. I don't think they have that same philosophy, but we hit this major turbulence, and the pilot gets it. They think, I guess it was humor, but he goes, wow. He goes, well, we're rocking and rolling. If you're feeling it back there, man, you should see what it's like flying this airplane up in the front. Okay. Weren't so many people that thought that was great, but he was having fun with it. So, yeah, to answer your question, you have to, it's hard, yeah. You can talk to yourself, but you don't want to, yeah. Now, you can tell them afterwards, like Sully did. He told us afterwards he had an oh shit moment, but yeah, I don't know that I would. Okay, so talking about management, the difference between management and leadership. So, I told you when I was 25 years old, I was offered this first management position with these hardware engineers and all of that. And I went into the office, and first of all, it was a little weird. I realized I was sitting on the other side of the table, and people were coming in, and they were asking me for things. And that was a little like, ooh. So the senior engineer comes in, and he sits down. This is like my second day. And he says, you know, I just need to get something off my chest. I said, okay. And mind you, I'm 25, and all the engineers are about in their mid-40s, and I looked like I was about 12. And so he comes and goes, I need to get this off my chest. He goes, I wanted your job. And I didn't get it, and I'm not really sure why you're more qualified than I am. But, you know, I'm a loyal employee, and I'll do what I can to help you. Okay. And he got up.
I have one of those.
That's when did you have one of
I
those?
have one of those right now.
Okay, so that's when I realized, you know, I was in there and I was thinking about, boy, we need to improve our processes, and the quality isn't great, and gee, I got to do something from execution and productivity. I very quickly realized this was not my main focus at this point. I had to focus, and that's when I understood what leadership was about. I realized that before I could make anything happen, big one was I had to create relationships with these 8 engineers that I knew nothing about. They knew nothing about me. I knew nothing about them. So we had to start getting a sense. My job was very different. I had to explain to them that, you know, you guys are the experts. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to listen to you guys, learn from you guys, and wrap some creative thinking around that, and then hopefully work as a team to make that happen. So it was about relationships. It was about vision. What are we trying to achieve? Well, you know, we want the chambers to be up 99% of the time instead of whatever. We want to shorten the test cycle in half. We want to make sure that there's you know, 10% fewer defects or whatever it was. You had to put all that in place. And then, through the development of the relationships and trust, it was, you know, are we all in this together? Do we feel this is the right set of objectives? Are we going to go make this happen? And then, a lot of it comes to principles and values. It's them getting to know me. What am I all about? Can they trust me? You know, do I do what I say? You know, do I demonstrate integrity? So I learned real fast that this was interesting, and yes, this is what I had to do. But as I told you, every 2 years, I was offered a new job in a new area that I knew nothing about. And so this is where I had to start, was up here. And without this, there is no way. I would have come into these groups, and it would have been a failure. I would have been saying, well, let's change this process. So I was saying, you know, change, right? Let's change this process. Well, I'm not going to change that process. I don't know who you are, what you do, or, you know, why you even care about me. Really, really important. The first thing to think about is, you know, us as individuals, there are kind of 3 key dimensions of who we are. And it's really important to understand who you are and how people perceive you as an individual. So the first part is just, you know, your values and beliefs. Because your values and beliefs are going to translate into the culture of that organization. So what are the things you value? And are you demonstrating that on a day-to-day basis? This is really important, words and actions. And we're going to talk a little bit more later about communications and the importance of communications. But the most important thing is when you say something, you can talk all day long, Sam, and I'm going to listen to what you say, but until I actually see your actions to support your words, the trust is going to come from the actions, right? And how many times people who say all the right things, but don't deliver. So if you're going to say you're going to do something tomorrow, do it. If you're going to say, you're going to help somebody make sure you prioritize that. Because if you have people who every day feel like, you're not actually delivering upon your word, you're going to lose trust immediately. And then heart and soul. People just understanding what you're all about. You need to demonstrate passion in what you do. People will determine right away whether you're genuine or whether you're just, telling them what they want to hear. So people understanding what's important to you. What are you passionate about? And you said something, you were talking about that earlier. Do you align with an organization? And I'm going to suggest that if a company you work for, from a cultural perspective, or just, what the company's all about, if it doesn't fit with you, it's going to be hard for you to be passionate. People aren't going to see your heart and soul. And what's important from a leadership perspective is at the end of the day, you leave your footprint on people. It's what I was telling you about, Coach French. They saw his heart and soul. That's what they saw. The next one, very important. Mike, you brought this one up, right? How do you conduct yourself in situations? If you want to be respected as a leader, you have got to have a certain gravitas, right? You've got difficult situations all the time. And one of the things that in this case helped me was when I was about 23, I think, when I just started with IBM, I had a team lead. And I just kind of watched this guy go into these meetings, and everybody be screaming and yelling, there'd be all kinds of emotion and whatever. And he just stuck to the facts. Didn't go into emotion, stuck to the facts. And he could agree to disagree, and he could walk out of that meeting still feeling good about everybody he was working with, and move on. And I thought, wow, I like that. I like that. Yes?
I also had 2 decades at IBM. You call that egoless programming.
I'm sorry?
Egoless programming.
Egoless programming.
Yeah.
Correct.
And I saw it all the time. People going, and they would just like get each other's throats at a meeting, arguing technical points. And you would think there were actually some of them who mad at each other in the scene. But the second they stepped out the door, they were best buddies, having coffee. It wasn't so much about the gravitas. It was just that they left the technical conflict in the meeting,
right,
and it didn't spill over into their personal working relationship.
Right. I've had so many people, just say, oh, God, Lory, that's so much patience. It's if you learn to conduct yourself, I think, in that way, you'll enjoy it. You'll never find conflict an issue. Because conflict, it shouldn't be an issue. It shouldn't have to be emotional. It's just about you have an opinion, I have an opinion. Tell me why you have that opinion. I'll tell you why I have mine. We'll look at the facts. And if you and I can't come to a win-win solution, well, then maybe we do have to escalate it to somebody else. But I don't feel bad about that. I mean, we've talked about it. We just can't seem to meet in the middle. But it's not emotional. The second you get into, raising it to it's not a productive conversation. It just doesn't really go anywhere. And do you do this repeatedly in life? So people will really analyze your behaviors. I mean, it's really, really important to think about that. And then the last one is we all have innate talents. We have skills. So we're born with certain talents, and then we develop skills, and we accumulate knowledge, and we gain experience. And that just becomes part of your competencies. But as I said, when it comes to leadership, leadership for me, if you look at the jobs they gave me, it was all about potential. Because I didn't have any knowledge, any experience, any skill in the majority of the areas that they gave to me. So it was all about potential. And I would encourage you, this is a way also to motivate your teams. If you see people have potential, how many times do you see jobs today? Well, you must have 15 years of experience in this and 10 years of experience. I don't believe in that. I just flat out don't. Matter of fact, that just frustrates me. Because I believe if you have the ability to learn and you have certain basic skills, you can really pretty much learn to do anything. And the learning curve is not that big. Okay, so that whole concept of 10 years doing this, 15 years, I just don't buy it. But potential, so I'll give you an example. We have an employee in our company who started out as a temp sitting in for our receptionist who was on vacation. And then we had an opening when she came back. We have customer service. So we needed somebody, so we put him on customer service. Well, he was working for a manager who was handling all of our business operations. And, but I could see in this guy that he had potential leadership. He would go above and beyond. He would just make things happen. He was passionate about what he did, you know, would work 24/7, whatever was required to make it happen. So when that guy who was the manager, he ended up moving someplace else for another job, for his wife was moving. I asked him, I said, you know what, I think you can do this job. He said, well, I don't know, you know, I said, you have the potential. I said, so let's just, you be the team lead, I will coach you, I will mentor you, I'll work by your side. And he's grown into that job, and he's the perfect person for it. But that's where I say, you know, as a leader, look at the potential. If you want to motivate people and you want to inspire people, help people to grow to that next level. You know, help them see, spend time understanding what do they want to do. You know, where do they see themselves in 3 or 5 years, and what can you do to help them to get there? And give them an assignment that may stretch them a bit, but you know, and then be there to support them. But it's really important. Because when people feel like there's no growth, or you know, people don't have faith in them, it's kind of demoralizing in a way. So, you know, at the center of leadership is all those things we talked about. There's an individual who's the leader. I'm heading up an organization. The things you need to think about when you're heading up an organization is, I'm going to suggest, and we'll talk about each one a bit more, who we are and what we do. Who we are and what we do every day is going to affect what we inspire and what we enable. And how you're going to be measured as a leader is what you inspire and what you enable. Because when you inspire people to be their best, that's when you're going to get the maximum tangible outcomes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So who you are at the core. It's really, really important to think about, and I would suggest just go back, when you go home, just try and jot these things down. We had, last year I mentioned to somebody that I work for a small company here, and we were acquired by a larger company in Chicago 3 years ago, and it's about a 600-person organization. And the CEO of that company is just fanatic about leadership. And you don't see that too much these days. So he's the CEO of a 600-person company. What he does is every year he invites 12 people. So I was invited last year. You spend 8 sessions with him throughout the year, 2 days each. So 16 days you spend with your CEO with 12 other people. And this is what you do. You think about, you do a lot of reflection on who you are and what you do and what you inspire and what you enable. And it's amazing when you take the time to think about this. There were people who were looking at their life purpose, their professional mission. They weren't sure that they were in the right job. You know, they hadn't really thought about, does it really align with who I am? So, you know, when you look at things like your life purpose, I'll give you an example. For me, going through this and really thinking about this, I've recognized that what I like to do is mentor, teach, coach, grow, and develop people. That's what I like to do. That's what I enjoy most in life. So even going forward, you know, I retire someday. It's got to be something like that. That's what gives me satisfaction.
It's interesting because in a way, if making this observation from what you've described as the career trajectory, that's sort of what happened for you to make you successful. It's interesting that you've adopted that or internalized and felt that you can share that now with others.
Right, and that's a good point. Why that, I don't know. I had a lot of people invest in me, and maybe that inspired me in a way. It's just been, it's a fun thing for me, especially at this stage. This is a stage I love giving back. So management to me is all about, it's about, I like to make a difference in the business, but I like to grow and develop the people to make sure they're inspired to do what they're doing. So that is what, But think about it. Go home and think about, what is your life purpose? What inspires you? What makes you excited when you get up every day? Just write it down. Try and write it. It's easy to go, I have a life purpose. When people had to write it down, I'm not really sure what my life. One person didn't even know what their life purpose was. Professional mission, for me, It is, I love to grow and develop. I don't like to be an individual, I like to be a manager. But to grow and develop organizations, get them to that level of being inspired, but to then actually enable change. So if I'm, every job I had was about enabling change. Either something was broken or it was a new area that you needed to do something with. If you get to the point where the organization is stable and it's just running like a charm, I'm not interested in it anymore. Okay, that's just who I am, and I know that. So you want to think about what is important to you. What do you want to achieve? What is your professional mission? What do you really want to achieve? As we said, spoken and lived values. I know what's important. To me, what's important to me is integrity, trust, honesty, people doing what they say they're going to do. That accountability is really important to me. So think about for yourself. So to your point earlier, if you're in an organization and they don't value those things, I'm probably in the wrong organization, right? Because that's important to me. I'm going to work with Micah, but if the whole company really doesn't represent that, it doesn't feel real good. You know, so it's alignment of who you are with the culture of a company and the people you're working with, yes. And then your beliefs and assumptions. I have, write down your beliefs. I'm going to share them all with you, but I've realized, well, I have a lot of beliefs, right? You're kind of surprised by how many beliefs. You just write them all down someday. A big one for me is I believe you have a choice when you wake up in the morning. You either look at the glass half full or half empty. And I believe that's a choice you make. I prefer to look at it half full. Others, maybe not so much. But that's important to me, and I like to surround myself with people who look at the glass half full. So that's also part of management. Sometimes you get to select your teams and your people. So it's important that you select people that share your values, that share your beliefs, right? Very, very important. And then dreams and aspirations, we should all understand what we're striving for, and the path you're on, is that really in line with where you're headed? What you do is simple. It's really the application of your talents, your knowledge, and your experience. These are things as a leader you just must do. And as we talked about, this takes time. This isn't your day-to-day, just sit down and do your tasks. Very important to present a vivid picture of the future. It's funny, when I worked at Visa, they had a mission statement that was 14 miles long. I can't even tell you what it was, okay? And we used to ask people, what is the mission statement for Visa employees? Nobody could tell you. Now, how could you be working in a company when you really don't understand what the goal and the objective is? That's not great. And then if you take it a step further, what's most important is if every single person in your team needs to understand how what they're doing ties to that. So when you put those objectives and visions and so forth, it's important that you translate that down into what they're doing. If you want them to feel good about what they do, and then when you report results on a regular basis, you need to talk about how did what you did contribute to that, right? And you have to, you know, the culture, we talked about that. You have to live. You have to live the desired culture. You can't be telling people, you know, I want you to be accountable and I want you, and then you never respond to anything or you never deliver anything. You have to live it. Big thing is judge, decide, and act, and we talked about that. There's always going to be options. To me, there's no right or wrong answers. There's just options. And as a leader, you have got to be decisive, because at the end of the day, if you're only collaborative works great up to a point, but then the organization isn't going to move if nobody's willing to make a decision. So that's the tough part. As a leader, you've got to make a decision. Not everybody's going to be happy, but the best thing you can do is you can at least communicate the rationale. You want to make sure you've listened to everybody. You've heard what their ideas are. And then you as a leader got to digest it all and say, for this reason, this is the decision I'm making. And make sure that people understand your rationale. At least they can understand where you're coming from. And they can embrace it. Because, you know, you can't just let 3 options sit out there forever. Communicate. And you brought this up. The big important piece on communication, when I think of what I do every day, what do? That's all I do. I communicate. I don't do the work. They do the work. He does the work. I don't do the work. He does it. So all I do, I mean, I set visions. I got to talk to people about what they're doing. I got to follow up. I got to talk about, you know, what their roles are. Everything we do, I have to make decisions. I have to talk about why I made the decision. Everything we do is about communicating. So think about how important that is. because it's not what I say, it's how you perceive it. That's the tricky part. How did you perceive what I just said? So are you asking your employees, are they hearing what you're saying?
No.
Right? Right? You may think you're communicating this. You have an example. You're saying, Mike, you can.
I have an employee who has had a problem. One of the reasons they hired me is because of problems going on for a long time. And he takes a bunch of stories, they're mine, and he has a 4-week deadline, and he delivers them all on the last day of the deadline, and they're incomplete. And we're trying to get him to break it down and deliver one thing at a time. And I gave him this very clear, verbal and written, repeatedly, instructions. Take that story, break it down in tasks, tell me which day you delivered each task. I asked him 4 times.
So do you know why the communication's breaking down?
Because when he, so my team lead.
What did he hear?
Interpreted, I have a copy of my team lead on the email. My team lead fed back to me what he thinks that person heard was, we want it sooner.
Yes. So
So
see
he
the
held on to everything, and he worked overtime, and he delivered it all in a big lump sooner. That's
Right.
what he heard, that hurry up.
perfect
What I
example.
wanted was, we want predictable chunks, and we want you to work on the most important chunk, and we want to give other chunks to other people to work on. We don't want you to hold on to the whole thing, right? Just give me the chunks. And he
Perfect
just,
example.
in writing, he just did not.
And where do you think it broke down?
It's his style of
It was
work.
it's just the way his mind, it's the way he's thinking. And so depending upon the way people think, they interpret your words in a different way. So a lot of times you have to say, okay, are we clear? It's amazing because you know what you're saying, but the other person.
He's never demonstrated the ability to break anything down. That's just an alien concept for him. He doesn't understand that. He takes a holistic view, and he just massages the code until it does what he thinks it should do. And I'm going to have to teach him how to break things down.
Right. So you've recognized that. You recognize what you said, how he interpreted. You recognize it's because he doesn't break. So now you've got to, like you say, you've got to spend time and effort to tackle that. I will tell you one of the important things on communications, and we do this, and probably lots of other companies do too, is taking.
One more point I mean.
Yes.
So, maybe he understood it, but maybe he wanted that system to do it by himself.
Well, I think that's certainly part of it. He doesn't want to let go.
Like emotional issue or emotional bonding to that piece of
It's
code.
his style of coding. He's a self-taught programmer that has worked without a team. He's not used to working with a team. He's not used to breaking things down. He's not used to planning things out.
Because people have that kind of ownership thing, like, oh, this is my thing,
Yes,
so
there's definitely-
I will do it. I will not let it go.
Yes.
So.
And he has also the anti-ownership. You assigned a bug to me in code that I didn't write. I don't own that. Like you signed that to me. It's a very clear ownership thing.
Yeah, and that is a problem. So we face that sometimes ourselves, where people don't want to let go, and you communicate. But it's to your point. It's getting underneath, understanding why your message is not
Right,
being.
To your point of, it's not what you say, it's what they hear.
Exactly. And what I was going to mention is it's really important, and I would encourage all of you to do this. And there's so many different tools you can do it in. But have your employees take personality tests. Because the other thing is how I talk to Sam may be very different to how I have to talk to Mike or how I have to talk to Hamad. Because I'll give you we do this. When we hire people, everybody gets this test because it looks into things like an introvert, are you an extrovert? Are you comfortable with conflict? Things like that. And what you'll find out is, I'll give you an example, I'm a type A person. Born in New York, very direct, okay? You know where I'm coming from. But we have other people in our company who are they're not, and I'm comfortable with conflict, not a problem. We have other people in our company not comfortable with conflict, very passive, so my style is sort of a brainstorming thing. You're going to say, Laura, what do you think about this? And I'll go, well, why do you want to do it that way? Tell me, I'm not sure, have you thought about this way? I'm really just wanting to talk about it. I just really want to generate. The other person, once we took the personality and it helped you to understand how they react to certain things, the other guy, the light bulb went off. He went, oh my God, now I get you. It was John Eric, in case you're wondering who it was, right? So, and he's like, I just felt like I was being challenged and attacked, and you were just telling me I didn't know what I said, no, I wasn't challenging you in a negative way. I wasn't, until I really understand your rationale, and I'm kind of thinking, well, I'm not sure. I kind of see it. I want you to prove to me that my thinking isn't making sense, So it's different personality type. Now he gets me. He goes, now when I come in, he doesn't go, well, he used to get defensive, and he used to get like, oh my God, she's attacking me. He goes, wow, I totally get you now. And it was only because we went through this, and it helped to identify, if you have this personality type, this is how others may perceive you. And if you're dealing with Mike and he has this personality type, wow, understand this is what his sensitivities are. And this is how you have to communicate to him. So it's not unusual. You're going to have teams of people that are very, very different. And you've got to tailor your communication style. Tailor it and understand the people you're dealing with. Because if not, you're going to go like this. Your communications is just going to, it's not going to work. Any questions on that? Any comments?
Just a comment.
Yes.
So it seems to me as though, as a leader, you have to have like these various sub-personalities, if you will, to deal with as many different types as you might
Sure.
have on your team.
Very
Or
true.
just understanding of that, how the persons work, or how.
Right, I
they
don't mean it's a
think.
split personality, but what I'm trying to say is you just constantly have to be aware of tweaking your own personality to adapt to
You do.
whoever you're talking to at the moment.
You do. I'll give you an example.
But yet you were consistent as well, though.
Well, and once people get to know you, right, so you almost have to have that level of conversation to explain it. So now that I'm conscious, I'm a type A person, I will, if I sense somebody's a little passive or not comfortable with conflict, I'll say, hey, if I'm just, I'm really just wanting to have a conversation or brainstorm. So I kind of go out of my way to make them realize that, I'm conscious of the fact that maybe they need to know I'm not attacking, I'm not challenging them. We've had situations. Hemant is fairly direct. And he's had people who have felt, he'll just say, well, I don't understand why we just don't do it this way. And 9 times out of 10 he's right, okay? But I said, Hemant, it's the way you say it to that person. So we've had people who say, well, I think he thinks I'm stupid. Well, no, he doesn't think you're stupid. He's just saying this is the way he thinks it should be done, and he's just communicating the way it is. But you can see that was communication style. And once they understood, no, you're not stupid, he actually, but it brings it to a different level. But it is a conscious, and yes, and you do have to deal differently with different people. Because I have some people, if they're type A, I can go, hey, okay, this is it, I just want blah, 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 and we're all good, we walk away. Right? And the other person has to go, okay, well, tell me, here's what I'm thinking, and, and it's just what they're comfortable with.
Exactly.
Right? So it's a little bit of tailoring. It's not a big deal, but it's being conscious of the people you're with. Okay, the cohesive teams you brought up earlier. Very good question. He said, I separate personal from business. I would suggest I don't. So I will tell you that in those however many groups I've organized, my best friends are people who worked for me over the years. My best friends are people who worked for me over the years and continue to be. So I know them on a personal level, very personal level, and I know them on a business level. And I would suggest that, yes.
Yeah, but a lot of it also has to do with respect as well. If they respect you and understand that you can, when you're outside of work, on a personal level, but when it's time to get work done, they know that they have to get it done because they respect you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Michael. And he knows a lot of my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows a lot of people that work for me. And maybe it is establishing that respect, because when I'm at work and something isn't getting done, or we need to talk about something, that's a whole separate thing. So in terms of how I am, my personal relationship is this, but I do have both. But having that personal relationship makes it so much easier for me to know where you're coming from. Because we get each other, we understand each other, we get each other. So now it's just a matter of focusing on work. versus when it's two people you don't quite know, I don't know where you're coming from, I don't know if I can trust you, I don't know, you got a whole nother layer of complexity on top of all the rest. So I would suggest it's okay. Matter of fact, it's, I think, really important if you want people, you know, to feel part of a cohesive team, you need to have interest in them. Interest in them as a person. I mean, how many people do you have that, unfortunately, you know, it's a situation where they don't really think you care about them as a person. You know, you come to work, you do your thing, you don't really know them, you don't really know. That's not a great situation, right? How do you feel when your boss doesn't really know anything about you? Do you think that's odd? You do think it's odd. If they know nothing about, they don't know if you have kids, they don't know if you're married, they don't know if anything. What about the rest? Yes.
So every week on Friday at 3 p.m. I have a meeting with my boss that has nothing to do with work. It's just hours. And for an hour, we'll just catch up on how everything's going, what are you doing for the weekend. And it's, from the beginning, he started doing that. And it, I don't know how to explain it, but when you go into it, it's just you have this understanding of each other, and it definitely makes me want to actually make sure this gets done for him and for his boss, right? Anytime it's more of a personal relationship, even though it's still, he's very hard to get everything done, but the fact that he will take out of his busy day an hour to just ask, how are you doing?
And I think that's the important point. They were willing, because we know we're all busy. Somebody was willing to take the time out of their day and ask how you're doing. One of the things, like if you notice an employee who is just, seems like they're having a bad day, you know, sit them down and say, hey, is everything okay? Is there anything I can do? You're not prying, you're demonstrating interest, you're demonstrating compassion. And that just, once again, builds to the trusting relationships.
But you have to be careful because there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. Right?
Yes, that is correct.
And so if you want to show compassion, you have to be empathetic, show empathy and not solve their problems.
That is correct. And you have to demonstrate equity. I've had situations where I had a guy one time who he wanted to live someplace else and do his job, and his job really wasn't conducive. He was a programmer. It wasn't conducive to go living at that point in time, living someplace else. But his father had a medical condition, and really it was a case where we said, you know, maybe you need to think about bringing your father here. It was just in another state. It wasn't, because if I had granted that to that person, to your point, and I have to then be willing to grant it to all of you. Well, could we have all of our employees move to another state? No. So equity is really important. And like you say, you can't solve their problems. You can be there to listen and so forth, but at the end of the day, you're right. You can't take on their personal problems. But it's just...
Or even like showing sympathy by saying, like pointing out the silver lining or pointing out the positives or just trying to put a positive spin on things is not appreciated, right? They just want you to feel that you understand what they're going through. Exactly.
Yes, listening, right? Just being there and to your point, not trying to solve it, but listening.
You know, I
Yes.
think that if we went back to the educational process, I'm thinking, building cohesive teams might come down to just a really basic precept, I think. I was taught to always be a team player and make the boss look good.
Yeah.
So it does.
Could you talk to everybody who reports to me?
No, I'm telling you, because then I believe that this personal, lovey, touchy, feely thing is irrelevant. Because if everybody practices that mantra, then it's equitable. Everybody's doing their job and is looking to excel. The boss has a positive reflection, and then that is conducive to a positive relationship with the boss anyway, as opposed to thinking that this personal interest in the individual is going to elicit that behavior. I'm not saying it won't.
Right.
I'm just suggesting that it might be a longer process.
Well, you got to earn the respect of your employees, right? And a lot of times people want to know that you care about them, you know, and you're not just caring about the numbers and the business and whatever, because at the end of the day, it's people. who are going to deliver upon your vision and objectives. And as people, they don't want to feel like they're just somebody in there delivering upon the numbers, right?
Well, I know that when we, for example, at times have had conference calls,
Mhm.
your Monday morning conference call. So how was the weekend? Fine. End of story.
Well, now, let me,
That is a conversation killer, isn't it? Oh, it was fine. Yeah.
I would say there's not a great relationship there, right? Right,
I would say the
Right.
same. Because you kind of wonder, when
Right.
you find, nobody has anything to say.
right,
Like, oh, I went to this great
right.
event, or, nothing. It's sort
So
of like,
there's-
how could you possibly have such a boring existence that you didn't do anything?
But there's some underlying thing there that they don't, that it's not an environment where they really want to share.
Sure.
So there's something there. You got to get underneath that to say, if they're just saying fine, most people love to talk about what they did for the weekend. To them, it's not, right, it's
It's sort of irrelevant
it's like, do they really care?
Do they, yeah.
Do they really care? So it does come down to that they have to feel sincerity that you do care.
Shouldn't that come from
right?
the leader, though? I mean, the leader
From
should
the-
be able to say, so, how was your weekend, guys? I went here, there, did this, and that. Okay, if you put yourself out there and you share, then it's more likely than not, I'll be prompted to say, oh yeah, I went to a great exhibit or whatever. Obviously, I've
Sure.
got to kind of participate. I can't just sit back and say, oh, I had a fine weekend, and not elaborate. If my boss is sharing, then I might be so inclined, but if he doesn't
If you
open
feel
up-
he really cares. I mean, let's face it, we all know bosses who walk around and say, they're just doing the motion, right? And if you feel it's just a motion, so how was your weekend? I really don't care, but just, we know people that do that, right? So how did, well, okay, I went around and I talked to them. You can feel that versus, hey, how did it go? And so, and there's always going to be people, don't get me wrong, there's always going to be people you're not going to strike a relationship with. So don't think that's going to be 100% on your teams.
But again, it depends on the personality of the team. So if that person is not willing to share, openly with everybody, then he will not share.
Right.
So even if you ask one-to-one, he will share, or he might share.
Yeah, so it's not
Based
everybody's
on
going to.
the personality types as well.
Mhm.
Like if they are ready to open in a group versus, they are comfortable with one-to-one.
But I would suggest if you have a whole group of people and nobody is willing to answer, right? Because like Vermont says,
Yeah.
there's some personalities that may not. But if nobody's willing to answer, there's something wrong with the dynamics of that group.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Something wrong with the dynamics of that
I
group.
would tend to agree with you.
Right, okay. Resolving conflict, very important as a leader. And as I mentioned, building capability, leadership capability, help your people grow. Last two areas here are what you inspire. So when you look at what you do and the actions you take, all the things we just talked about, that's going to elicit certain actions, emotions, and behaviors. And what does inspiration mean? Inspiration means what you inspire people without any sort of, a promise of a reward or a threat of a punishment. You can tell when your people are inspired. You can tell people who believe in what the organization is trying to do. They contribute. They are loyal. They're committed. They're accountable. They take things and they run with it. Okay? When you see that happening, there's trust, there's hope, there's passion, there's loyalty. They're willing to take risk. They're willing to put themselves out there. That's when you know you've inspired somebody. If you see these things, you have been effective at inspiring them. And then when you think about what you inspire, if you inspire people, that's going to maximize, at the end of the day, you're measured on the tangible outcomes. What are the tangible outcomes of your team? So I would encourage you to go back and think about and write down, what do you want those outcomes to be? Do you have those very definitively put in place? And can your team, can they articulate what those are? So what are the financial results you're looking for? Is there a financial measurement? The culture you're trying to create, when you look at your own values and beliefs and so forth, is that the culture that you've created? Change. You should always look at not what is, but what can be. What change do you want to make happen? Every day what I do is when I drive to work, I think about yesterday. And I think about what in my day went well and what were the things that I didn't think went so well. And I focus on that the next day. I encourage every day, think about the day you